The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty road as Jenna Ashford clutched the sides of the wagon, her knuckles white against her green skin, watching the trees thin out to reveal the settlement that would become her new home. She had been traveling for 3 days with the envoy from the human territories, each mile taking her further from everything she had ever known and closer to a marriage she had agreed to out of desperation, rather than desire. Her small tusks worried at her lower lip, a nervous habit she had developed as a child, and one that her mother had always scolded her for because it made her look weak. But her mother was not here now, and weakness was all Jenna felt as the wagon wheels creaked to a halt before a modest wooden house with smoke curling from its chimney. The treaty between the Orc clans and the human frontier settlements had been signed only 6 months ago, ending decades of brutal conflict that had left both sides exhausted and grieving. Part of that treaty included provisions for unity marriages, symbolic unions meant to demonstrate that peace was not just possible, but actively being built between their peoples. When the elders of her clan had called for volunteers, Jenna had stepped forward not out of bravery, but because the alternative was watching her younger siblings go hungry through another harsh winter. The humans had offered grain, livestock, and tools in exchange for these marriages, resources her clan desperately needed. She told herself it was an honor, that she was serving her people, but as she sat in that wagon staring at the unfamiliar house, all she could think about was the wedding night that would come after the ceremony. The stories she had heard about human men were not kind. Some said they were weak and soft, unable to handle an orc woman's strength. Others whispered darker tales about cruelty, about men who saw orc brides as trophies or property, reminders of a war won. Jenna had no way of knowing which stories were true, and which were exaggerations born of generations of hatred. All she knew was that tonight she would be expected to share a bed with a stranger, to give herself to someone whose language she barely spoke, and whose customs were as foreign to her as the stars in a different sky. The driver of the wagon, a weathered human man with gray streaking his beard, turned to her with what might have been sympathy in his eyes. "This is the place, miss, the Merrick farm. Your husband-to-be should be inside." Jenna nodded, not trusting her voice. She had been practicing human speech during the journey, but her tongue still stumbled over the softer consonants, and she worried that her accent would make her sound stupid. She climbed down from the wagon with more grace than she felt, her travel-worn dress catching on the rough wood. The envoy had provided her with human clothing, saying it would help her fit in better, but the fabric felt strange against her skin, too tight in some places and too loose in others. The door to the house opened before she could decide whether to knock or wait, and a man stepped out onto the porch. Jenna's breath caught in her throat. He was tall for a human, though still shorter than most orc men, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard physical labor. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and fell to his collar in waves that looked like they had been recently washed. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, warm brown eyes that looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. Not disgust, which she had braced herself for. Not hunger, which she had feared. Something gentler, almost uncertain. "You must be Jenna," he said, and his voice was deeper than she had expected, steady and calm. "I am Adrian Merrick. Welcome to your new home." She managed a stiff nod, her hand instinctively moving to smooth down her dress. "Thank you for having me," she said, the formal words feeling awkward in her mouth. She had memorized this greeting, practiced it 100 times during the journey, but now that she was actually speaking it to him, it sounded hollow and rehearsed. Adrian descended the porch steps, moving slowly as if he did not want to startle her. Up close, she could see the lines at the corners of his eyes, the weathering that sun and wind had etched into his face. He was perhaps 30, she guessed, maybe a few years older. Old enough to have fought in the war, certainly. The thought sent a chill through her. How many of her people had he killed? Did he look at her and see the faces of enemies he had slain? "The ceremony is set for sunset," Adrian said, glancing toward the western horizon where the sun was already beginning its descent. "The local priest will perform it. It will be brief. I thought you might want time to rest and refresh yourself after your journey. I have prepared the spare room for you to use until after." The kindness in his voice caught her off guard. She had expected demands, orders, perhaps indifference. Instead, he was offering her space, time. She searched his face for signs of deception, but found none. "That would be good," she said carefully. "Thank you." He led her inside, and Jenna was immediately struck by how clean everything was. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace at one end and a sturdy wooden table at the other. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, filling the air with earthy scents that reminded her almost of home. Everything was well maintained but simple, the home of someone who worked hard and lived modestly. "The spare room is through here," Adrian said, guiding her to a door off the main room. Inside was a small bedroom with a narrow bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a wooden chest, and a washstand with a basin and pitcher. Sunlight streamed through a single window, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. "I have brought fresh water for washing, and there are clean linens in the chest if you need them. Take as much time as you need." He withdrew, closing the door behind him, and Jenna stood alone in the quiet room, her heart hammering against her ribs. She moved to the window and looked out at the farm that stretched before her. Fields of wheat rippled in the breeze, and she could see a barn in the distance, chickens pecking in a fenced yard. It was peaceful, productive, nothing like the harsh mountain terrain where her clan made their home. She tried to imagine herself living here, waking each morning to tend these fields, sharing meals at that wooden table, and her mind simply could not make the picture feel real. The water in the basin was cool and soothing against her face. She scrubbed away the dust of travel, then examined herself in the small mirror that hung above the washstand. Her reflection stared back at her with wide, frightened eyes. Her skin was the deep green of pine needles, her tusks small and neat, her black hair long and thick. She had always been considered pretty by orc standards, strong but not overly muscular, with features that were well proportioned. But what did human standards value? Would Adrian find her attractive, or would he have to force himself to touch her out of obligation? The thought made her stomach turn. She had overheard the married women in her clan talking sometimes, late at night around the fires, about the wedding night and what came after. The orc women spoke of it with a mixture of pride and pragmatism, as something that could be pleasurable if both partners were considerate, but also as a duty that had to be fulfilled regardless of desire. Would it be the same with a human man? Or would the differences between their bodies make it painful, difficult, shameful? A knock on the door startled her from her spiraling thoughts. "Jenna," Adrian called softly, "the priest has arrived. Are you ready?" Ready? What a ridiculous word. She would never be ready for this. But delaying would not change what was coming, so she squared her shoulders, lifted her chin the way her mother had taught her, and opened the door. "I am ready." The priest was an elderly human man with kind eyes and gentle hands who performed the ceremony in the main room of the house with only Adrian's nearest neighbor, a farmer named Thomas, serving as witness. The words were in the human tongue, full of promises about unity and faithfulness, an honor that Jenna only half understood. She repeated the vows when prompted, her voice steadier than she felt. and tried not to think about what would happen when the priest left and she and Adrian were alone. When the priest asked Adrian to place the ring on her finger, she was surprised by the delicate silver band he slid onto her hand. It was simple but well crafted, and it fit perfectly, as if he had taken care to ensure it would. His own ring matched hers, and when their fingers touched during the exchange, she felt calluses on his palms, the rough texture of a man who worked with his hands. "You may seal your union with a kiss," the priest said, and Jenna's heart stopped. Adrian must have seen the panic in her eyes because he leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Instead of her lips, he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, a gesture so unexpectedly tender that tears pricked at her eyes. When he pulled back, he gave her a small smile, and she saw understanding in his expression, as if he knew exactly how terrified she was and wanted to reassure her without words. The priest blessed them. Thomas congratulated them with awkward enthusiasm, and then they were gone, riding away down the road as the last light faded from the sky. Adrian closed the door, and the house fell into a silence so profound that Jenna could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. "I imagine you are hungry," Adrian said, moving toward the kitchen area as if nothing world-changing had just occurred. "I have stew prepared. It is simple, just vegetables and rabbit, but it should be warm and filling." Jenna blinked, confused by the normalcy of the offer. "You do not want to go to the bedroom?" The question hung in the air between them, blunt and graceless. She immediately wished she could take it back, but Adrian just looked at her with those steady brown eyes and shook his head. "I want my wife to have dinner," he said simply. "The bedroom will still be there after we eat." She did not understand. Every story, every warning, every piece of advice she had received about the wedding night had emphasized its immediacy, the expectation that a husband would claim his bride as soon as the ceremony concluded. Yet here was Adrian, ladling stew into wooden bowls as if they had all the time in the world. They sat at the table, and Jenna discovered that she was ravenous despite her anxiety. The stew was indeed simple, but it was well seasoned and hot, and she found herself eating with more enthusiasm than dignity. Adrian ate more slowly, watching her with an expression that might have been amusement. "Tell me about your family," he said when she paused to catch her breath. "You have siblings, yes." The envoy mentioned that in his letter. It took her a moment to switch her mind from food to conversation. "3 younger ones, 2 brothers and a sister. They are still children, the oldest is only 12. And your parents, my father died in the war. My mother works herself too hard trying to provide for us." The words came out more bitter than she intended. "That is why I volunteered for this. The resources your people offered, they will keep my family fed through the winter." Adrian nodded slowly, setting down his spoon. "My parents are also gone. My father died when I was 16, my mother 2 years later. This farm was theirs. I have worked it alone since then." There was a shared understanding in that moment, a recognition that they had both known loss. Both carried responsibilities that weighed heavy on young shoulders. It did not erase the vast differences between them, but it created a fragile thread of connection. "You fought in the war," Jenna said. It was not a question. "I did." His voice was quiet and he looked down at his hands. "I was conscripted when I turned 18. Served for 5 years before I was allowed to return home. I have seen more death than any person should. Did you kill any of my people?" The question was out before she could stop it, sharp and accusing. Adrian met her eyes and she saw pain there, old and deep. "Yes. I did what I was ordered to do, what I thought was necessary to survive. I am not proud of it. I carry those faces with me, orc and human alike, the ones I could not save and the ones I had to fight. When the treaty was announced, I thanked every god I could name. I never want to hold a weapon again. His honesty stunned her. She had expected denial, justification, perhaps anger at being questioned. Instead, he gave her truth, raw and uncomfortable. She found herself believing him, believing that he genuinely regretted the violence he had been part of. "I lost an uncle and 2 cousins in the war," she said softly. "And my father. He died in the final year in one of the border skirmishes. We never even recovered his body." "I am sorry," Adrian said, and the words carried genuine weight. "For what it is worth, I am sorry for all of it, for every loss on both sides." They finished their meal in contemplative silence, and when the bowls were empty, Jenna helped Adrian clean them despite his protests that she was a guest. The simple domestic task felt strangely normal, and she found some of her terror ebbing away as they worked side by side. He was not what she had expected. He was quiet where she had anticipated aggression, gentle where she had feared cruelty. When the last dish was dried and put away, the silence returned, heavier this time with the weight of expectation. Jenna's hands trembled as she dried them on a cloth, and she knew she could not put off the inevitable any longer. Adrian had been kind, had given her food and space and conversation, but the wedding night still loomed before them, and she still had no idea what to expect. "I suppose it is time," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian turned to look at her, and she saw understanding dawn in his eyes. He crossed the room to stand before her, but he did not reach for her, did not grab or pull or demand. Instead, he waited until she met his gaze. "Jenna," he said carefully, "I need you to understand something. You are my wife now, yes, but you are also a person who has been through a tremendous upheaval. You have left your home, your family, everything familiar to you. You have married a stranger from a people who were your enemies only months ago. I would be a fool to expect you to be comfortable with me, let alone ready for intimacy." She stared at him, not quite believing what she was hearing. "But the wedding night, it is expected. It is the husband's right to—" "I do not care about rights," Adrian interrupted gently. "I care about doing this correctly. Building a marriage, a real partnership, takes time. It takes trust. Neither of us knows each other yet. How can I ask you to be vulnerable with me when you do not even know if you can trust me?" Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. The relief that flooded through her was so intense it was almost painful. "I do not understand. Why would you agree to this marriage if you did not want a wife?" "I did not say I do not want a wife," Adrian said, and for the first time, she saw color rise in his cheeks, a faint blush that made him look younger. "I very much hope that you and I can build something real together. But I want it to be genuine, not forced. I want you to come to me because you choose to, not because you feel obligated or afraid." "So you will just wait?" Jenna asked, searching his face for any sign of deception. "For how long?" "For as long as it takes." His voice was firm, certain. "We have all the time in the world, Jenna. There is no rush. I would rather spend months, even years, building your trust and affection than claim my so-called rights tonight and make you miserable." The tears spilled over, running hot down her cheeks. She had been braced for violation, for pain, for indignity, and instead, she had been given patience and respect. It was too much, too unexpected, and the emotions she had been holding back since leaving her clan finally overwhelmed her defenses. She sobbed, great shaking gasps that she could not control, and when Adrian carefully pulled her into an embrace, she let him, clinging to his shirt as weeks of fear and grief poured out of her. He held her through it all, one hand rubbing soothing circles on her back, the other cradling her head against his shoulder. He did not shush her or tell her to stop, just let her cry until she had no more tears left, until she was hollow and exhausted and strangely lighter. "I am sorry," she hiccuped when she finally pulled back, mortified by the wet patch her tears had left on his shirt. "I did not mean to fall apart like that." "You have nothing to apologize for," Adrian said firmly. He produced a handkerchief from his pocket and gently wiped her face, his touch careful around her tusks. "You have been incredibly brave. It is all right to let yourself feel the weight of what you have done." He guided her to sit on the bench by the fireplace, then busied himself banking the fire for the night. When he returned, he sat beside her but maintained a respectful distance. "I think perhaps we should talk about expectations," he said. "Set some ground rules so you feel safe here. This is your home now too, and you should have say in how we live in it." Jenna nodded, wiping at her eyes with the heel of her hand. "What kind of rules?" "Well, for one, your bedroom is yours, the spare room where you changed earlier. I will not enter it without your permission, and you can lock the door if it makes you feel better. My bedroom is on the opposite side of the house. Eventually, I hope we might share a room, but only when you are ready." The knot in her chest loosened a bit more. "What else?" "You are not a servant or a slave. This farm requires a lot of work, and I would appreciate your help with it, but we will work together as partners. Any decisions about the farm, about our household, we will make together. Your voice matters here." "And if we disagree?" Jenna asked, thinking of her parents' occasional arguments, her father's tendency to simply overrule her mother when he felt strongly about something. "Then we will talk until we find a compromise, or we will agree to disagree and find a middle path. I will not force my will on you, Jenna." "I give you my word on that." She studied him, this strange, gentle man who defied every expectation she had carried with her. "Why are you like this? The stories about human men, they say you are violent, that you take what you want and care nothing for women's feelings." Adrian smiled sadly. "And what do the stories about orc women say in human settlements? That you are savage, bloodthirsty, incapable of tenderness or civilization. Stories born from war are rarely kind or accurate. The truth is more complicated. Yes, there are violent men among my people, just as I am sure there are violent women among yours. But there are also kind men, thoughtful men, men who believe that strength includes gentleness." "My mother would say that gentleness is weakness," Jenna said, though even as she spoke the words, she questioned them. Her mother had been hardened by war and loss, had needed to be tough to keep their family alive. But was that the only way to be strong? "I have seen the strongest warriors break when they lost someone they loved," Adrian said quietly. "And I have seen quiet farmers stand firm against impossible odds to protect their homes. Strength comes in many forms. Gentleness takes more courage than cruelty, I think. It is easy to hurt people. It is much harder to be kind, especially to someone who might hurt you in return." The words settled over her like a blanket, warm and comforting. She found herself wanting to believe him, wanting to trust that this could work, that she had not made a terrible mistake in coming here. "I will try," she said finally, "to give this a real chance, to trust you. That is all I ask." Adrian stood, stretching out muscles that had probably been tense for hours. "It is late and you must be exhausted. Let me show you where everything is so you can settle in for the night." He walked her through the house, pointing out where he kept spare blankets, where the privy was located outside, how to work the pump for fresh water. Her bedroom, he explained, had a bolt on the inside of the door that she could use anytime. He showed her his own room only from the doorway, pointing out its location so she would know where he slept. "If you need anything in the night, anything at all, do not hesitate to wake me," he said. "I am a light sleeper. And in the morning, I will teach you about the farm, show you around properly. But for tonight, just rest." Jenna retreated to her small room, bolting the door more out of habit than fear, and changed into the simple nightdress that had been packed with her things. The bed was softer than the straw mattress she had slept on her entire life, and the quilt smelled like lavender. She lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house settling around her, and tried to process everything that had happened. Her wedding night had not been what she expected. There had been no pain, no violation, no regret. Instead, there had been kindness, patience, and the first fragile seeds of hope. Adrian was still a stranger, still a former enemy, still someone she knew almost nothing about. But he was also a man who had looked at her fear and chosen compassion over entitlement. That had to count for something. Sleep came slowly, but when it finally arrived, it was deeper and more peaceful than she had dared to hope. The morning sun woke her, streaming through the window with cheerful insistence. For a moment, Jenna forgot where she was, reaching for the familiar sounds of her mother moving around their small dwelling, her siblings' sleepy complaints. Then memory returned, and with it, the strange mix of loss and possibility that was her new reality. She dressed in the simple work clothes that had been provided, sturdy pants and a loose shirt that were much more practical than the dress she had worn yesterday. When she emerged from her room, she found Adrian already up, cooking something that smelled wonderful over the fire. "Good morning," he said with a smile. "I hope you slept well. I have made porridge with honey and dried berries. It is not fancy, but it will fuel us for the work ahead." They ate together, and Jenna was struck by how comfortable the silence between them was. Not awkward or tense, just peaceful. After breakfast, Adrian kept his promise and gave her a proper tour of the farm. The property was larger than she had realized, with fields of wheat and barley, a vegetable garden that was beginning to show the first signs of harvest, and a small orchard of apple trees. The barn housed 2 dairy cows, a handful of chickens, and an old plow horse named Thistle who nuzzled at Jenna's hand looking for treats. "I manage most of the work myself," Adrian explained as they walked between the fields, "but it is a lot for one person. During harvest season, I usually hire help from the neighboring farms. We all trade labor back and forth. Having a partner will make everything easier." "I am strong," Jenna said, eager to prove herself useful. "I can do heavy work. I helped in my clan's gardens and with hauling water and firewood." "I do not doubt your strength," Adrian said with a grin. "But farming has a learning curve. Different crops need different care at different times. I will teach you everything I know, and in return, maybe you can teach me some of the techniques your people use. I have heard that orc clans can grow food in mountain soil that humans struggle with. That knowledge could be valuable here." The idea that her skills and knowledge might be valued rather than dismissed was novel and heartening. They spent the morning working together, with Adrian showing her how to check the wheat for signs of disease, how to judge when the vegetables were ready for picking, how much water each section of the garden needed. Jenna absorbed it all, asking questions when she did not understand, and was pleased when Adrian praised her quick learning. By midday, they were both sweating and ready for a break. They sat in the shade of the apple trees, sharing water from a clay jug and eating bread with cheese that Adrian had made himself. "You are a good teacher," Jenna said, flexing her hands. They were sore from unfamiliar work, but it was a good soreness, the kind that came from productivity. "You are a good student," Adrian replied. "Much better than I was when my father first tried to teach me farming. I spent more time daydreaming than working." "What did you daydream about?" The question slipped out before she could consider whether it was too personal. Adrian looked thoughtful, gazing out over his fields. "Adventure, I suppose. I wanted to be a knight, to travel the world, to see things beyond this farm. Then I was conscripted, and I got more adventure than I ever wanted. Turns out the reality of violence and death is nothing like the stories make it seem. Now I am happy right here, tending my land, living a quiet life. I used to dream about adventure too, Jenna admitted. About leaving the mountains, seeing human cities, maybe even the ocean. My mother said I was foolish, that there was nothing out there for orcs but hatred and danger. Maybe that was true during the war, Adrian said carefully. But things are changing. Slowly, yes, and not without resistance, but they are changing. You and I, we are part of that change. Every day we live peacefully together, we prove that the old hatreds do not have to define the future. It was a heavy burden to place on a marriage, to make it symbolic of something larger than two people trying to build a life. But Jenna could not deny the truth in his words. How many people on both sides were watching these unity marriages, looking for proof that peace could work? The days began to establish a rhythm. Jenna woke each morning to the sound of Adrian moving around the kitchen, preparing breakfast. They would eat together, discussing the day's tasks, then spend the morning working the farm. The work was hard but satisfying, and Jenna found herself taking pride in her growing competence. She learned to milk the cows without spooking them, to gather eggs without getting pecked by the protective hens, to judge which vegetables were ready for harvest by touch and smell. Afternoons were often spent on household tasks. Adrian taught her to bake bread, and she taught him how to prepare some of the traditional orc dishes she had grown up with, though they had to substitute ingredients since many of the mountain herbs she would normally use did not grow in this climate. They cleaned and mended and preserved food for the coming winter, working side by side in a partnership that grew more comfortable with each passing day. Evenings were Jenna's favorite time. After the work was done and they had eaten dinner, they would sit by the fire and talk. Adrian told her stories about his childhood, about his parents and the farm before the war. She told him about her siblings, about life in the mountains, about the orc traditions that had shaped her understanding of the world. They taught each other words in their respective languages, laughing at each other's pronunciation errors. True to his word, Adrian never pressured her about physical intimacy. He respected her space, never entering her room without permission, never touching her without invitation. But as the weeks passed, Jenna found herself growing more comfortable with his presence. She began to notice little things about him, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the strength in his hands when he lifted heavy sacks of grain, the gentle patience he showed with the animals. About a month after their wedding, they went together to the local market in the nearest settlement. Jenna had been nervous about facing other humans, worried about how they would react to an orc in their midst. Her fears proved partly justified. There were stares, whispers behind hands, a few openly hostile glares. But Adrian stayed close to her side, his presence a steady comfort, and when a shopkeeper refused to serve them, Adrian simply took Jenna's hand and led her to a different stall where the merchant was more welcoming. "I am sorry you had to endure that," Adrian said as they walked home, their purchases loaded in the small cart pulled by Thistle. "Not everyone is ready to let go of the past." "It is the same among my people," Jenna admitted. "When I told my mother I was volunteering for the unity marriage, she barely spoke to me for days. She thinks I am betraying our clan by lying with a human." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Are we lying together, though?" "I mean, in the eyes of others we are married, but in truth, we are more like housemates who happen to share a last name." There was no accusation in his voice, no frustration, but Jenna heard the question beneath his words. Where was this going? How long would they maintain this careful distance? "I do not know what we are," Jenna said honestly, "but I do know that I no longer fear you. That has to count for something." "It counts for everything," Adrian said softly. "Fear is the enemy of love. Without fear, other things become possible. Love." It was the first time either of them had mentioned the word, and it hung in the air between them, full of possibility and danger. Jenna turned it over in her mind as they walked home in companionable silence. Did she love Adrian? She did not think so, not yet. But she liked him, respected him, enjoyed his company. And sometimes when he smiled at her across the dinner table or praised her work in the fields, she felt a warmth in her chest that might be the beginning of something deeper. The harvest season arrived with its endless demands. They worked from dawn until well after dark, cutting wheat and barley, threshing grain, preserving vegetables, making cheese and butter from the abundant milk. True to his word, Adrian's neighbors came to help, and he and Jenna went to help them in return. It was exhausting work, but there was also joy in it, a sense of community and shared purpose. Jenna was surprised by how many of the neighboring farmers were kind to her. Yes, there were those who kept their distance or made their disapproval clear, but there were also families who welcomed her warmly, who seemed genuinely interested in learning about orc farming techniques, who treated her as a neighbor rather than a monster. A woman named Margaret from the next farm over became something like a friend, teaching Jenna the local recipes and showing her the best places to find wild herbs. One evening, as they were preparing dinner after a particularly long day of harvesting, Adrian suddenly stopped his work and looked at Jenna with an expression she could not quite read. "What is it?" she asked, alarmed. "Is something wrong?" "No," he said slowly. "Actually, something is very right. I just realized that I am happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. I have not felt this way in years, maybe not since before the war, and it is because of you, because of having you here, because of who you are." The words sent a flutter through Jenna's stomach, a feeling that was both thrilling and terrifying. "I am happy too," she admitted. "This life we are building, it is good. You are good." Adrian stepped closer, and Jenna did not step back. He reached out slowly, giving her time to refuse, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her pointed ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, and she found herself leaning into the touch. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. A real kiss, not like at the wedding. Jenna's heart hammered, but this time it was not from fear. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and Adrian cupped her face in both hands and leaned in. His lips were soft against hers, gentle and questioning, and after a moment of surprise, Jenna found herself kissing him back. It was nothing like she had expected, nothing like the rough, claiming kisses the married women in her clan had described. This was tender, patient, a conversation without words about possibility and promise. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Adrian rested his forehead against hers, and Jenna could feel him trembling. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted, "but I was so afraid of pushing you, of making you uncomfortable." "I wanted it too," Jenna said, surprised by her own boldness. "I just did not realize it until now." They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, and Jenna felt something settle in her chest, a certainty she had not known she was seeking. This was right. This marriage, this partnership, this man, it was all right. Dinner was a quiet affair that night, but the silence was charged with new awareness. Jenna found herself hyper-aware of every move Adrian made, every glance he sent her way. When their hands accidentally brushed as they cleaned up, it sent sparks up her arm. The air between them felt electric, full of unspoken questions and possibilities. "Jenna," Adrian said as they stood by the fire afterward, "I want to be clear about something. Just because we kissed does not mean you owe me anything. We can take this as slow as you need. If you are not ready for more, that is completely fine. It was so typical of him, always thinking of her comfort first, and it made her brave. What if I am ready? She asked, meeting his eyes. Or at least ready to try. She saw hope flare in his expression, quickly tempered by concern. Are you certain? I do not want you to feel pressured. I am not pressured, Jenna said firmly. I am nervous, yes, but I trust you, Adrian. I trust you not to hurt me, to be patient with me. And I think I am ready to truly become your wife. The room felt too small suddenly, too warm. Adrian took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. We will go at your pace. If at any point you want to stop, just say so. I mean that, Jenna. Your comfort matters more to me than any physical desire. She nodded, her throat tight with emotion. I know. That is why I feel safe enough to try. He led her not to his bedroom but to hers, understanding without being told that she would feel more comfortable in her own space. Once inside, he was true to his word, moving slowly, checking in with her constantly, making sure she felt safe and wanted at every step. He undressed her carefully, his hands gentle, his eyes full of wonder rather than lust. When he finally saw all of her, her green skin bared to him without shame or hesitation, he traced the lines of her body with reverent fingers. You are beautiful, he said, and she could tell he meant it. So incredibly beautiful. She had never felt beautiful before, not in the way his eyes told her she was. She reached for him in turn, helping him out of his own clothes, marveling at the differences between their bodies but also the similarities. They were both just people, flesh and bone and beating hearts, trying to connect in the most intimate way possible. What happened next was tender and awkward in equal measure. There were moments of fumbling uncertainty, whispered questions and gentle guidance. Adrian kept his promise to let her set the pace, never pushing, always responding to her cues. And when he finally joined with her, it was with such care and patience that the discomfort was minimal and quickly gave way to other sensations, to a closeness and intimacy that went beyond the physical. Afterward, they lay tangled together in her narrow bed, skin against skin, hearts gradually slowing to normal rhythms. Jenna felt changed, not just physically but emotionally. A barrier had fallen, and she felt more connected to Adrian than she had ever thought possible with another person, let alone someone from a different species who had once been her enemy. Are you all right? Adrian asked, his fingers drawing lazy patterns on her shoulder. More than all right, Jenna said honestly. That was nothing like I expected, in the best way possible. He kissed her temple, pulling her closer. You were brave. Thank you for trusting me. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and when Jenna woke in the night, Adrian was still there, holding her safe. The bolt on her door, she realized, had remained undrawn. She did not need it anymore. The next morning brought a shyness between them, but also a new ease. They had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back, only forward into whatever their marriage would become. As they worked together that day, Jenna caught Adrian watching her with soft eyes, and she found herself smiling back, a secret joy bubbling in her chest. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Jenna's life. She and Adrian grew closer each day, learning each other's bodies and hearts in equal measure. They laughed together, worked together, made love with increasing confidence and pleasure. The farm prospered under their joint care, and Jenna began to think of it as truly home rather than just the place where she lived. But the fragile peace was not destined to last untroubled. Late one afternoon, about 3 months after their wedding, a group of orcs appeared on the road leading to the farm. Jenna recognized them immediately as members of her clan, and her heart sank when she saw her mother among them. Stay behind me, Adrian said quietly, but Jenna shook her head. They are my people. Let me handle this. She walked forward to meet them, aware of Adrian following a few paces behind. Her mother, Jenna Ashford, looked older than Jenna remembered, her face lined with new wrinkles, her hair grayer, but her eyes were still sharp and hard as flint. "So it is true," Jenna said in the orcish tongue, her voice dripping with disgust. "My daughter has become a human's whore." The words hit like a physical blow, but Jenna forced herself to stand tall. "I am married, mother. Lawfully married under both human and orc law. I am not a whore." "You lie with a human, with one of the monsters who killed your father. That makes you a whore and a traitor." Jenna spat on the ground. "I have come to bring you home, to save you from this shame before it is too late." "I am home," Jenna said firmly, though her voice shook. "This is my home now. My life is here with my husband. That creature is not your husband. He is your captor. Look at you, wearing human clothes, speaking the human tongue, working in their dirt like a slave." Jenna's eyes were wild with grief and rage. "I should have stopped you from volunteering. I should have locked you in our dwelling before I let you go to them." Adrian stepped forward then, and Jenna saw two of the orc men reach for their weapons. "Please," Adrian said in careful, accented orcish, "there is no need for violence. Jenna is here by her own choice. I have not forced her to do anything. She is free to leave if she wishes." Jenna turned her glare on him. "You speak our language, so you can better deceive our women with your lies." "I speak it so I can honor my wife's heritage," Adrian said calmly. "So our children will know both their mother's tongue and their father's." Children. They had not discussed children yet, but the mention of them sent a strange thrill through Jenna. Children who would be half orc and half human, living bridges between their peoples. "You will not pollute our bloodline with your weak human seed," Jenna snarled. "Jenna, I am giving you one chance. Come with us now, return to your clan, and we will never speak of this shameful episode again. Your siblings miss you. We can find you a proper orc husband, someone strong and worthy." For a moment, Jenna was tempted. She did miss her siblings terribly, missed the familiar sounds and smells of her mountain home. But then she looked at Adrian, at his concerned face and patient eyes, and she thought about the life they were building together. She thought about laughter over breakfast, shared work under the sun, tender nights in each other's arms. She thought about becoming not less orc but more fully herself. "No," she said quietly. "I will not come with you, mother. I love my siblings. I love you despite your harshness, and I will always carry my clan in my heart. But my place is here now. Adrian is my husband, and I am staying with him." "Then you are no daughter of mine," Jenna said, and though her voice was hard, Jenna saw tears in her eyes. "You are cast out from the Ashford clan. Your name will not be spoken among us. You are dead to us." The words were a ritual, formal and final. Jenna felt them cut deep, severing ties that went back generations. But she also felt a strange freedom in them, a release from expectations that had weighed on her all her life. "I understand," Jenna said, tears streaming down her own face. "I am sorry, mother. Sorry that I cannot be who you wanted me to be, but I have to choose my own path." Jenna turned away, her shoulders rigid with pain and pride. The other orcs followed her, but one of them, a young male Jenna recognized as her cousin, lingered for a moment. "Your brother sends his love," he whispered quickly. "He says he understands and he hopes you are happy. He will watch over the others." Then he too was gone, and Jenna and Adrian stood alone in the gathering dusk. The weight of what had just happened crashed over Jenna, and she collapsed into Adrian's arms, sobbing with a grief that felt like it would tear her apart. "I am sorry," Adrian murmured, holding her tight. "I am so sorry. If I had known this would cost you your family, I would never have." "Do not," Jenna interrupted fiercely. "Do not apologize for being good to me, for building a life with me. This is not your fault. My mother made her choice, just as I made mine. but the pain was still there, raw and huge. She had known, intellectually, that choosing to stay in the human lands might mean losing her birth family. But facing the reality of it, hearing her mother's formal disownment, was more devastating than she had imagined. Adrian did not try to fix it or minimize her pain. He just held her as she cried, offering his strength and presence. When her tears finally subsided, he guided her inside and made her tea with honey, wrapping her in blankets by the fire even though the evening was warm. "Tell me about them," he said softly. "Your siblings. I want to know who they are." So Jenna talked, pouring out stories about her brothers and sister, their personalities and quirks and dreams. She talked about her father, the good man he had been before the war took him. She even talked about her mother, about the woman Gara had been before grief hardened her heart. As she spoke, Adrian listened with his full attention, occasionally asking questions, helping her honor the family she had lost even as she committed to the family she was building with him. It was exactly what she needed, and by the time she ran out of words, some of the sharp edge of her grief had dulled. "They are not gone," Adrian said when she finished. "Not really. You carry them with you in your memories, in the lessons they taught you, in the strength you inherited from them. And someday, if they are willing, perhaps there can be reconciliation. Hearts can change, Jenna. I have seen it happen." She wanted to believe him, but it seemed impossible. Her mother's words had been too final, the wound too deep. Still, she appreciated his optimism, his refusal to let her sink into complete despair. The days after her mother's visit were difficult. Jenna found herself swinging between grief and anger, mourning the family she had lost while resenting them for forcing her to choose. Adrian was patient through it all, giving her space when she needed it, offering comfort when she asked for it, never making her feel guilty for her complicated emotions. Gradually, the acute pain faded into a duller ache that she learned to carry. She threw herself into the farm work, into making their household truly hers, into learning everything she could about her new life. And slowly, she began to feel like more than just an orc living among humans, or a woman caught between two worlds. She began to feel like Jenna, a person in her own right, building a life on her own terms. Winter arrived with its own challenges. The farm work slowed but did not stop, with animals still needing care and equipment needing maintenance. Jenna and Adrian spent more time indoors, and the forced proximity only deepened their connection. They played games by the firelight, read to each other from Adrian's small collection of books, made love in the warmth of their bed while snow piled up outside. Midwinter brought a surprise. Jenna had been feeling off for a few weeks, tired and queasy, and when she finally admitted it to Adrian, his eyes went wide. "Could you be pregnant?" he asked, wonder in his voice. She had not considered it, but as soon as he said the words, she knew it was true. Her last monthly bleeding had been over 2 months ago, and she had been attributing its absence to stress. But now, thinking about it, she recognized the signs her mother had described when talking about her own pregnancies. "I think I might be," she said, placing a hand over her still flat belly. Adrian dropped to his knees before her, placing his own hand over hers. "A baby, our baby, half you, half me, proof that our peoples cannot just coexist but create something new and beautiful together." Fear and joy warred in Jenna's chest. What if something goes wrong? What if human and orc children are not meant to be mixed? What if— "Then we will face it together," Adrian said firmly. "But I have faith, Jenna, faith in you, in us, in what we have built. This child will be loved and wanted no matter what challenges come." As the weeks passed and her belly began to swell, Jenna found herself grateful for Adrian's steady optimism. The pregnancy was harder than she expected, her body struggling with the half-human child inside her. But Margaret, their neighbor, had some experience with birthing, and she came often to check on Jenna and offer advice. Her presence was a reminder that Jenna was not alone, that she had built a community here even as she had lost her original one. Spring arrived with new lambs and crocuses pushing through the last snow. Jenna's belly was round and prominent now, and she felt the baby moving inside her, strong kicks that made both her and Adrian laugh with delight. They prepared a small nursery in one corner of their bedroom, building a cradle together and sewing tiny clothes from soft cloth. The baby came on a warm evening in late spring, after a labor that was long and difficult. Margaret attended the birth, with Adrian hovering anxiously nearby, holding Jenna's hand and whispering encouragement. When the baby finally emerged, squalling and red, Jenna collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but triumphant. "A girl," Margaret announced with a smile. "A beautiful, healthy girl." She cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a soft blanket, then placed her in Jenna's arms. The baby looked up at her with eyes that were Adrian's warm brown, but her skin was a pale green, lighter than Jenna's but unmistakably orcish. Two tiny tusks were just visible in her gums, and her ears came to delicate points. She was perfect, a living blend of both her parents' heritages. "What should we name her?" Adrian asked, tears streaming down his face as he gazed at his daughter. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at this tiny person who represented so much hope and possibility, Jenna knew exactly what to call her. "Harmony," she said. "Her name is Harmony." Adrian smiled through his tears. "It is perfect. She is perfect. You are perfect." The weeks that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, of learning how to care for this tiny, demanding person. But they were also filled with wonder and joy. Harmony was a good baby, quick to smile and curious about everything. She had Adrian's easy temperament and Jenna's stubborn determination, a combination that promised an interesting childhood. Word of the half-orc baby spread through the settlement, and reactions were mixed. Some neighbors came to visit, offering congratulations and gifts. Others kept their distance, making their disapproval clear. But more came than Jenna had expected, and she began to realize that while prejudice still existed, it was slowly being overcome by genuine relationships and shared experiences. About a month after Harmony's birth, on a morning bright with summer sunshine, there was a knock on the door. Adrian answered it to find a young orc male standing on their porch, travel-worn and nervous. "I am looking for Jenna Ashford," he said in accented human speech. "I mean Jenna Merrick. I was told she lives here." Jenna appeared in the doorway, Harmony in her arms, and stared at the visitor. "Crag, is that you?" Her younger brother nodded, his eyes wide as he took in the sight of her with the half-human baby. "Mother does not know I came. She would be furious. But I had to see you, had to make sure you were all right." "Come in," Jenna said, tears already forming. "Please come in." Crag entered cautiously, looking around the house with undisguised curiosity. Adrian gave them space, retreating to the kitchen but staying close enough to intervene if needed. "You look different," Crag said, studying his sister. "Happier, I think, more settled." "I am happy," Jenna said. "It has not been easy and I miss you all terribly, but I have a good life here. A good husband, and now a daughter." "Can I meet her?" Crag asked shyly. Jenna brought Harmony closer and Crag stared at his niece with wonder. "She has your eyes," he said, "but also his, and her skin is both colors. She is beautiful, Jenna, truly beautiful." They spent the afternoon together, Jenna catching up on news from home, Crag telling her about their siblings and the clan. Their mother, he admitted, was still angry and hurt, refusing to speak Jenna's name. But their sister had cried for days after Jenna's disownment, and their youngest brother kept asking when Jenna would come home. I cannot go back, Jenna said sadly. My home is here now, but I wish there was a way to bridge this divide, to help Mother understand that I have not betrayed anyone. I have just chosen a different path. Maybe seeing this would help, Crag said, gesturing to Harmony, who had fallen asleep in Jenna's arms. Seeing that orc and human can create life together, not just take it, that we do not have to be enemies. An idea began to form in Jenna's mind. Would you be willing to take a message to Mother? Not to pressure her, just to let her know that I love her, that I will always be grateful for everything she taught me, and that if she ever wants to meet her granddaughter, she would be welcome here. Crag nodded slowly. I will try. I cannot promise she will listen, but I will try. He stayed for dinner, charmed despite himself by Adrian's cooking and hospitality. As the sun set and Crag prepared to leave, he embraced Jenna tightly. I am glad you are happy, he whispered. Even if Mother cannot see it, I am glad. Watching her brother walk away down the road was bittersweet, but it also felt like a door opening rather than closing. Maybe reconciliation was possible. Maybe hearts could change. Maybe their daughter would grow up knowing both sides of her heritage rather than being forced to choose between them. The summer passed in a golden haze of baby laughter and farm work, of long evenings watching the sunset and quiet mornings marveling at how much Harmony grew each day. Adrian was a devoted father, sharing all the child-rearing duties equally with Jenna, getting up in the night for feedings and changing diapers without complaint. Watching him with their daughter made Jenna fall in love with him all over again, deeper and more completely than she had thought possible. On their first anniversary, Adrian surprised her by revealing that he had been learning orcish traditions from the few books available in the settlement. He had prepared a feast in the orcish style, honoring the way Jenna's people celebrated marriages, and he gave her a gift of hand-carved wooden beads that could be woven into her hair, a traditional symbol of a married woman's status in orc culture. I know I cannot replace what you lost, he said as he helped her weave the beads into her hair. But I want you to know that your heritage matters to me, that I honor where you come from even as we build something new together. I want Harmony to know both her peoples, to be proud of every part of herself. Jenna kissed him with all the love in her heart. You have given me more than I ever dreamed possible. A home, a family, respect, love. I would choose you in this life 1,000 times over. That night, after Harmony was asleep in her cradle, they made love with a passion and tenderness that felt like a recommitment of their vows. Jenna understood now what the married women in her clan had meant when they talked about the pleasure that came when two people truly knew and loved each other. This was nothing like the duty she had feared on her wedding night. This was joy, connection, celebration. Fall arrived with harvest time, and this year they had help in the form of several neighboring families who had grown to trust and like Jenna. They worked together to bring in the crops, laughing and telling stories, and Jenna realized with a start that she had friends here. Real friends who saw past her green skin and tusks to the person underneath. On a crisp October morning, as Jenna was working in the garden with Harmony strapped to her back in a sling, she saw a small group approaching along the road. Her heart leapt and fell simultaneously when she recognized the figures. 3 orcs, one of them her mother. Adrian, she called, her voice tight with anxiety. They are here. He came immediately, standing beside her, a hand on her shoulder in support and solidarity. Together they watched Gara approach, flanked by Jenna's younger sister and her cousin. The orc matriarch looked older still, as if the year had weighed heavily on her. She stopped a few paces away, her eyes moving from Jenna to Adrian to the baby on Jenna's back. For a long moment, no one spoke. Your brother brought me your message, Gara said finally, her voice rough. I told him I would never set foot in human lands, never forgive your betrayal. But then winter came, and I sat in our dwelling, and all I could think about was that I have a granddaughter I have never met. That my daughter is lost to me not because she died, but because I drove her away with my pride and anger. Mother, Jenna breathed, afraid to hope. I do not understand your choices, Gara continued. I do not understand how you can love a human, how you can live among them after all they have taken from us. But Cragg says you are happy. He says this human treats you well, treats you as an equal. And I thought about your father, about how he would be ashamed of me for letting my grief turn me into someone who would cast out her own child. Tears streamed down Jenna's face. I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to choose my own path. I know that now. I was so blinded by my pain that I could not see yours. Gara's voice broke. I do not know if I can fully accept this life you have chosen, but I do not want to lose you, and I do want to know my granddaughter. Jenna carefully took Harmony from the sling and walked forward, closing the distance between them. Up close, she could see that her mother had been crying, that her eyes were red and swollen. Her name is Harmony, Jenna said, turning the baby so Gara could see her face. She is half me and half Adrian, and she is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Gara reached out with trembling hands, and Jenna placed the baby in her grandmother's arms. For a moment, the old orc woman just stared at the child, taking in every detail of her mixed heritage. Then slowly her stern face softened and she began to cry. She looks like you did as a baby, Gara whispered. Same eyes, same little nose. Oh, Jenna, she is perfect. Would you like to come inside? Adrian asked gently. We have bread and soup. You must be tired from your journey. Gara looked at him properly for the first time, really looked, and Jenna saw her mother trying to reconcile the human before her with the monsters from her imagination. You are the one who married my daughter, the one who speaks our language and honors our traditions. I am the one who loves your daughter, Adrian corrected, and who is grateful every day that she chose to take a chance on me. Something shifted in Gara's expression. Very well. We will come inside, but I make no promises. This will take time. We have all the time in the world, Jenna said, echoing the words Adrian had spoken to her on their wedding night, the words that had changed everything. They spent the afternoon together, awkward at first but gradually warming. Gara held Harmony with the expertise of someone who had raised 4 children, coaxing smiles from the baby and softening more with each coo and giggle. Jenna's sister, Mira, peppered her with questions about human life, clearly fascinated by everything she saw. Even their cousin seemed to relax, eventually accepting a tour of the farm from Adrian. As the sun began to set, Gara handed Harmony back to Jenna with obvious reluctance. I should return home before dark, but perhaps, if you are willing, I could visit again. Maybe bring your brothers next time. I would like that, Jenna said, her heart full to bursting. I would like that very much. Gara embraced her then, a fierce hug that spoke of love and regret and hope all tangled together. I am sorry, my daughter. Sorry for the harsh words, for the rejection. You deserved better from me. You are here now, Jenna said. That is what matters. After the orcs left, Jenna and Adrian stood in the doorway, watching them disappear down the road. Harmony babbled in Jenna's arms, and Adrian wrapped his arm around both of them. That went better than I dared hope, he said. She called me her daughter again, Jenna said wonderingly. She held Harmony and called me her daughter. Of course she did. Love is stronger than hate always. It just sometimes takes longer to recognize that. Over the following months, Gara became a regular visitor, bringing Jenna's siblings with her and slowly building relationships with both Jenna and Adrian. It was not always easy. There were awkward moments and cultural misunderstandings, old wounds that sometimes flared up. But there was also laughter, shared meals, and the joy of watching Harmony grow surrounded by family from both sides of her heritage. Other orc families, seeing Gara's acceptance, began to reconsider their own prejudices. A few more unity marriages were arranged, and this time there was less fear and more hope. Jenna found herself serving as a bridge between the communities, helping newly arrived orc brides adjust to human lands, facilitating communication between the settlements and the mountain clans. 2 years after their wedding, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset while Harmony played at their feet, Adrian took Jenna's hand. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Leaving your home, marrying me, all of it?" Jenna thought about that first terrifying day when she had arrived at this farm, about the wedding night she had feared, about everything that had come after. She thought about the pain of her mother's rejection and the joy of reconciliation. She thought about the challenges of bridging two cultures and the rewards of creating something new. "Not for a single moment," she said honestly. "You gave me time when I needed it, patience when I was afraid, love when I was ready to receive it. You gave me a home, a daughter, a future. You gave me the freedom to become who I was meant to be." "You gave me all those things too," Adrian said. "Before you came, I was just existing, going through the motions of life without really living. You taught me what it means to truly partner with someone, to build something bigger than myself." Harmony toddled over, demanding to be picked up, and they both laughed as Adrian scooped her into his lap. The little girl had her mother's strength and her father's warmth, and she was already showing signs of the bridge builder she would become. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jenna looked out over the farm, at the fields they had planted together, the life they had built with patience and trust and love. She thought about that first night when Adrian had told her they had all the time in the world. He had been right. They had taken the time they needed, built their foundation slowly and carefully, and now they had something unshakable. The future stretched before them, full of challenges and joys, harvests and hardships. But they would face it together, as partners, as lovers, as friends. And their daughter, and whatever children might come after, would grow up knowing that love could bridge any divide, that patience could overcome any fear, and that the most beautiful things in life were worth taking the time to build right. Jenna leaned her head on Adrian's shoulder, feeling Harmony's small heartbeat against her chest, and knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The orc bride who had feared her wedding night had found not just acceptance but genuine love, not just survival but a life worth living. And it had all started with one simple promise from a kind man who understood that the best things cannot be rushed, that trust must be earned, and that they had all the time in the world.